you guys, it's Mimsy here. I'm going to do a quick tutorial on how I made these shaker style cabinet doors. I just used MDF and a little bit of lattice trim and really very minimal tools required. All I used was my circular saw, a hammer and nails, and some wood glue. So that's it. This is kind of a hacker method of making cabinet doors. No rabbiting, no biscuit joints required. It's super simple. This tutorial is in conjunction with my kitchen refresh. I did a video a couple weeks ago about what my plans are to refresh my kitchen, and this was one of the projects on my list. So I'll link to that video here so you can take a look at that and get a tour of my kitchen and see what my plans are on that. So let's get started on this shaker door tutorial. All right, so here we are out in my driveway. I've got my MDF sitting on top of a couple of TV trays. I have sawhorses, but oftentimes I just use the TV trays because they're a lot better full support underneath my materials. And I've got the Craig jig guide for cutting or ripping lumber. And I've got those attached to my MDF with C-clamps that come with the Craig jig, and it works really well. But you could also just use a metal ruler or even potentially a really straight 1x4 or 2x4 as a guide. You just run your circular saw fence against that metal guide or whatever it is you use, and just make sure you keep that fence along the guide the whole way down. Take it nice and slow, and you can get a real straight rip cut on your material. So I am going to take off the clamps and move it to the perpendicular cut so that I can cut this perpendicular to the correct size of my cabinet door. So now I'm just lining up the fence of so I drew the line onto the MDF already to the exact dimension that I need to cut it. And right there you saw me lining up the saw fence with the metal guide that I've got here. You don't put the metal guide right on the line. You've got to account for the metal fence on your circular saw and where your blade is going to actually hit your material, your lumber. So that's what I'm doing right here, is I'm lining up my saw with the guide and then cranking down my C-clamp to tighten it down so that I'm cutting exactly on that line, because you have to account for that fence on your saw and also the width of your blade. So that's real important when you're cutting with a circular saw. Basics. So I'm doing the same thing on the other end there. I'm just making sure that my metal guide is in the right spot so that my blade is hitting directly on the line where I drew my line. So that's all set, and now I'm actually going to grab another TV tray to support the center of my MDF. So I'm going to shove that TV tray under here so that my MDF is not sagging, because MDF can be a little flimsy, and so I'm just stuffing another TV tray under there so it's completely supported and flat, and so when I get to the end of my cut it doesn't just collapse and fall down. So that's what I'm doing there. So I'm just setting this up now, and I'm just once again just measuring to make sure that my cut is going to be right on that line. So measure twice, cut once, you guys. That's the rule. So here I'm cutting the MDF just slow and steady so that you're not accidentally pulling away from your guide. You want to keep that fence on your saw right next to it. Okay, and then the next step in the project is to cut the lattice trim work to the correct dimensions. And this part is really easy. I mean, if you have a chop saw, you can use a chop saw. You could even possibly use your circular saw for this. That's a little bit hard to control, but I'm just using a regular old manual miter saw for this part. I find it easy and very accurate. So that's what I did. I could have pulled out my chop saw, but that just becomes a hassle to have to drag that thing out because I don't have a permanent table for it. I had one, but I replaced it with I put my printer on it. So anyway, after your lattice work is all cut to the proper sizes, I brought it inside my workroom, sanded off the rough cuts so it's nice and smooth and flat. And then the next step is to apply some wood glue to the lattice and glue it down to your MDF. So you want to dry fit everything and make sure everything is the correct size. And then pull out your wood glue and start your gluing. So here I'm just dry fitting to make sure I got these cuts really nicely done, and lining it up to make sure that the wood is straight enough that the doors will fit together when I hang them. All right, and so for my wood glue, I'm using Gorilla wood glue, which works really well. I poured the glue onto a plate, and I've used my Rockler glue spreader. It's got kind of a rubber paintbrush kind of a tip, but the bristles are pretty thick. So when you apply the glue, it spreads it out nicely, but it also kind of creates like ridges in the glue, almost like when you trowel on your mastic or your glue when you're setting tiles. It does that kind of same effect where it leaves grooves, and so that gives you a real good bond. So that's how I like to apply wood glue. It really sticks really well when you do it that way. As a matter of fact, on this project, I didn't even use any nails. I just glued my wood pieces together. I just didn't find it was necessary to use nails. And I didn't have any really short trim nails, so once these were glued, I tested them to see how well the bond was, and the bond was so good, I just thought, oh, what the heck, I'm just going to let it fly. So this method of gluing the lattice trim onto the front of the cabinets is what I did to all the rest of my cabinets when we bought this house 10 years ago. The cabinets were just totally flat face, and they had grooves in them, so I filled those in with plaster and then painted them all. And so these now are the same method as what I did 10 years ago when we first moved in. My cabinets are original 1962 to the house, so that's why I'm doing this cheater method here again. Okay, so the last part about this project is actually putting in the hinges, and there's a lot of different kinds of hinges you can use to attach your cabinet doors. It kind of depends upon the style of your box. If you're doing your cabinet doors as full overlay or face frame, or if they're inset. So you have to determine that by whatever type of situation you've got. I just put the I guess these are called Euro hinges or hidden hinges, something like that. Anyway, I just went to Home Depot, picked these up, and just followed the instructions. This particular hinge here comes with a template, and you actually put the template on there and draw through it. That's the way I did it anyway. You draw those holes and draw this hole, and you'll need one other tool that's pretty important, and you can buy it in the hinge area or in the hardware department, and that's the Forstner bit that cuts this hole here. So that's kind of the only other tool that you need for this project is to hang these. But that's it, you guys. That's all there is to it for these cabinet doors. I'm gonna link you to the next project, which was taking out the bulkhead in my ceiling over there. So check that video out right here next.